This.
Ready, Freddy?
We're ready. We're going. We're here. We're here. Oh man,
Wow.
we're live. Hi, hello everybody. Welcome. We are here on a Monday, which is different than a Friday. I don't know if you knew that, we had some busy times on Friday, so we had to reschedule it. And we have Wolf here. Wolf, hello. How are you?
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm hanging out here with you, so, not too bad. Pretty good. I
Chill.
notice you have a sword in the background. It's a good sword.
Yeah, it's Frostmourne.
Oh, yeah, okay. And you got a lamp. I like that lamp. Good lamp.
Thanks.
Um,
Thanks. IKEA.
so, Wolf, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Heart Machine, and who you are? And we'll ask a few questions, and then we'll dig into some of the work on Solar Ash and other things we want to talk about, if that's cool.
Yeah, sounds good. I am an environment artist here. There's two of them on the team, me and Nate Grove, and then the rest of the art team is pretty much our lead Cosmo, and then Alex, who's the creative director. So it's a pretty small team. So basically, what an environment artist does is they take what is gray box from the level designers and they finish it, so hopefully it's the final look that you have, which is maybe involving doing foliage, doing trees, building architecture kits, basically a lot of the stuff that you see that's just in games that's not the characters, the VFX. A lot of it's the environment artist work.
That's environment art.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into environment art? Like, what drew you to it, and like, what was your path for your career to it?
I went to school for game and entertainment design, so it's probably a pretty linear path compared to a lot of people.
Hmm.
So I went to Otis and got a degree in, what is it technically? Digital media with a focus in game and entertainment. And I think I kind of established in my junior year that I wanted to specifically go into environment work. Um, I was like kind of back and forth there for a while whether I wanted to like focus on character or environment, and I just knew 3D either way for games.
Mm-hmm.
But I found a few teachers there that I really loved that were environment artists that I just like the kind of more the expansive stuff that you can do with environment work and how it's pretty like broad spectrum of art.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, environment art is a pretty broad discipline. There's a lot that can happen in it. There are environment artists that will never touch certain aspects of it. Maybe they don't love architecture, so they stick to a lot of the more organic shapes and things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I know on our team at least, like because we're a smaller crew, because we have a lot of things that each person needs to do and kind of learn and get comfortable with, there's more asked of folks here to like actually learn more about materials, more about even VFX to some extent. There's been a lot, or lighting and decking. On larger teams, they have artists that just like straight up are lighting artists, but you
Mm-hmm.
kind of do a lot of different things on the project when it comes to environment art as that very broad label. What is your least favorite thing that you've done on the project?
My least favorite thing to do,
Yeah,
probably just purely because of my lack of knowledge, but it was probably the most I learned in a quick period of time. Probably also the most I fucked up. Is the is basically VFX work for environment work. I'm
I
not
see.
super great at it, and that's like a major thing I want to like do a little bit more focus on later, like Niagara and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I
never got a
mean,
chance before.
that stuff seems like magic to me.
Right.
I understand parts of it for sure, but then when you get to like the more uh, just complex noodles going everywhere on the node based graphs, it's pretty wild stuff. So
Yeah, and it's just like those sometimes like Cascade, those kinds of systems. It's either like Niagara or Cascade for Unreal Engine, but they both work completely differently,
they do.
and those also work separately, very differently from anything else in game development.
Yep.
Like, yeah, like LODs, which is level of definition, so of detail basically. And the way they do them in VFX work is a completely different process that it's like mind-boggling to try and retrain yourself to work in that system.
Well, that also requires a more technical mindset in a lot of ways, and not every environment artist is trained for those things.
No.
Like a tech artist is also like we've talked to people who are tech artists on the team, and or used to be like Chelsea, for example. And it's also a very broad spectrum, and it can mean a lot of different things. And there are tech artists that specialize more in animation or rigging, or more of the VFX or other things like that. And on our game, we've had a whole wide range of different material treatments and effects and kind of specialty environment building blocks through Houdini, which is its own can of worms that I think we've talked about before too. I don't know. Did you have fun doing anything with Houdini, or was that kind of was that a sticking point for you?
Houdini, it's a sticking point for some people, but you know what? I feel like the key to be on the good side is just never say something bad about the programs that you use, because then karma will beat you up.
They'll come back and haunt you.
Yeah, exactly. Just be nice to your programs.
Okay. That's good advice. I think that's very good advice.
Yeah, just be understanding. It's fine. But for the most part, I had a really good experience using Houdini. It really sped up the process. And just the difference between design, setting up an entire area super quick, and then us spending the time to set up parameters that basically change the top material and what the edging or the side materials look like, just by pre-setting that to be an available option. If I want forest, then I just click the button that says forest. It makes it so much easier for a lot of stuff.
Great tools. So I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort for people to develop those tools too. They don't come out of the box specifically for your game. You have to use a lot of time and effort on different people's parts, and certainly Chelsea and Len and other folks on that end really develop those. But I guess the other question before we dig into some of what you're going to share here with us, some imagery, is well, you've been with us for a while. I guess I asked you what your least favorite part of the process has been. What's your most favoritist part of the process? What do you really love doing when it comes to environment art?
My most favoritist part, honestly, I like working on the narrative spaces a lot. It's just super fun, and the art team really complements each other. Where me and Nate is an amazing environment artist too, and he is very good about doing that last 10% of beautiful decking, and that's sometimes the last 10% is 90%, right?
Takes a long time.
Yeah, so I'm really good about doing really, really broad spectrum, just blocking out lots and lots of areas, which I like doing that.
Sure.
I think that's my strong suit. As for stuff I really like to do, I don't know. I just like doing debris and putting rocks places artfully, which I guess is most of my job. So
that's decking and composition. That stuff it's a lot of fun. You get to build out the way that a space flows visually, and where the player's attention goes on first look and second look. Leading the eye. So that's all. Yeah. That's all super fun stuff. I mean, I like that stuff
a huge challenge on this project is just scale in general. Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
That was such a fun thing to figure out. Yeah.
We had some really silly scale, I think, in our game at different points, where it felt kind of absurd. The chairs were too big, or the coffee cups were too small, or whatever else, because our character, her scale's kind of off, and then our camera's very zoomed out and has a very wide kind of fish-eyed almost lens to get that field of view to really make things feel faster. And then because you're going so fast, you want things to be bigger in order for them to be recognizable. Otherwise, you don't really understand what it is. So
Yeah, that was a big sticking point for us, is that you're going like insanely fast, so things needed to be bigger to be enjoyable. But then when it came to the setting up the narrative spaces, it was, for me, the fun part was trying to figure out how to sneakily bring that scale down in a gradient that you don't notice that it's
Mm,
now her scale instead of being the giant scale from being in the main world.
yep. Right,
Hmm.
like the trees are pretty massive out there when you really stand next to them and think about them. In context, when you're going fast or on the clouds or whatever else, like you don't notice. They seem
Hmm.
correct, but then if you sit there and you're like, oh, all right, that tree, why is that tree larger than a skyscraper?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we did a lot of funneling into narrative spaces, and we would slow the character down, like actually, we call them walk volumes, and she's actually walking, and yeah, like you said, Wolf, you guys would do a lot of that kind of gradation, which is a clever way to do it. I'm going to switch over. We're going to show some fun things here. All right, we got an image up. Let me know when you can see this, and we can kind of talk through like what this is and why you wanted to share it. We've got a bunch of images to get through, so we'll try and blaze on through. But yeah, tell me about this scene. There's a before and after here.
Yeah, so what's like fun about this, I have like a whole set of these, is that this is kind of like the before and after is more talking about the interaction between like what an area could look like when it's handed from the level design group to the environment artist group.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like figuring out the broad strokes, and that level design will figure out the gameplay and like the spacing to be able to make an area feel good and achieve whatever puzzle or whatever like thing or platforming thing they want you to do. And then our job
Mm-hmm.
after that is to maintain basically that collision, that feel of that puzzle as much as possible, while like building like a look to it.
Right. And you can see the pretty dramatic differences between the top gray
Yeah.
box and kind of well, we had like several different versions of quote unquote
This is
box, pink
yeah.
box versus gray box versus whatever else. Just
Yeah.
to give ourselves like an array to pick from to be like, how finished is it, or how close to shippable is kind of the way that
Hmm.
we thought about a lot of things on the art side. And I remember, I think this was built out by, was like Cosmo originally and Nate on the first Greybox one, or did you do some of this too?
I think this gray box, I think this whole area was Cosimo,
Yeah,
our,
I think so.
yeah, our art lead did a lot of this stuff, which is pretty fun because we're not usually ones to handle that kind of stuff. And then I think it was Nate actually who built out this side.
Yeah, that's true.
So came out super cool. And this is like, it's funny too because even the after on this is like kind of old too. So
Right. Well, I mean,
yeah,
no
it's
one no
gone through
one will
some
notice unless you
iterations.
tell them that.
Oh shit, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's pretty wild. I think like the shapes used, we have to reduce things like collision, because if your
Hmm.
complex collision is too complicated, that can be very not performant. That can be kind of bad for the game. It'll chug on lower end systems. And then additionally, you kind of just see the stark contrasts, not even in just the lighting, but in the building shapes themselves, where there was a lot of cool implied curves there initially, and then it really started to take form and become a place that could almost be lived in. You could imagine it not just being, this is a video game space, but oh, this is also like a location that people use for some reason or another.
Yeah, yeah. It's like juggling that narrative development with also maintaining gameplay feel is a fun little challenge for us. Like architectural consistency in full zones is, yeah, was a
It,
big part.
it's a tough one. Go look at a Zelda temple and or a Diablo dungeon and be like, who the fuck used this for anything? This
Yeah, right.
is just pure nonsense. And I think part of what we were able to achieve largely, on art and design and kind of melding all that stuff, was something more believable, something that felt like this is a space that that had a purpose, had a real
Hmm.
intention, generally speaking. It was more grounded, and it didn't just feel like because video games, because to me, because video games is a bad answer.
Yeah. That's can only take you so far, and sometimes you get to a point where it takes you too far, and you're just like, I don't get it.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna jump to the next one.
Hmm.
All right. So this is still part of that same area, generally
Hmm.
speaking. But yeah, walk me through.
Yeah, this is the same area again. The first couple images are going to be at this area, and this was like a big. I guess it's like this is what we had a lot of images of because we did a big rework that had some very clear gray box, which is like what you can actually see is we used a lot of these cubes in the beginning. I think this was
Mm-hmm.
even like a lot of this wasn't built out with Houdini system at
No.
that point. Yeah. So this was a very complicated setup that it this image kind of shows more where the general idea is there, and then there might actually be a lot of back and forth between environment art and level design to try and balance that for it to narratively make sense as
Right.
being like structures and not just platforms. So that was like this was a big challenge area for that in particular, and we had like a lot of iteration for this.
I
But
remember this one being a true pain in the ass.
oh yeah.
This one, I think what Jordan built this out originally a million
Mhm.
years back, and she was using Unreal's primitives and like grouping them together and whatever else, and getting these structures on the top frame. And then it was a very laborious task on the EnviroArt side between, I think, is like a coordinated effort on all your parts to actually bring this into relief, like make it a real space that used other kit pieces that were already built instead of making brand new things. Because
Mhm.
this is like a very small corner of it, and it's much bigger and more complicated. And I remember there were a couple of times where we were very close to just cutting it.
Yeah, instead we kind of just like figured out like the different quadrants of areas that were like important for that. But
Right.
yeah. Yeah, as you can see in like this one, the top picture, there's a huge building in the background there.
Yep.
That was like a huge one big giant thing that was really hard to work with. So we
Yeah.
ended up trying to figure out like, okay, what are the things that are like crucial for gameplay? And we figured out these are the three like these are the few points that we need to go to pretty much. And then it's like we figured out building more compact buildings was a lot more like visually readable, and it ended up looking a lot better too in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
We wanted to create
Hmm.
points of interest, kind of peaks
Yeah.
and valleys. And previously, this thing had like you can see that top, like you were saying, Wolf. It had just had like a lot of building going on there, and it's hard to
Hmm.
parse. That's the other thing about a 3D game when you have a freeform camera is that there's a lot of possibilities for the players to not look at things the way you want them to look at it. And
Hmm.
so it becomes really challenging to make sure that it reads at a multitude of angles. Fortunately, we had some choke points. I think this shot right here is like the kind of entrance that expands outwards into the Iron Root area. Uh,
Yeah. It actually matches pretty one to one too. Like this,
yeah,
like the foreground. It's like there's areas in this that'll be like pretty much one to one the level design to like art because it worked well, like good choke points and stuff like that. And then there's other more difficult areas like that back building that took multiple long conversations to figure out how we wanted to address with like everybody on the same page.
it was quite the feat. This was definitely one that oh man, it caused so much pain, but it ended up in a really great spot. I
Yeah, it
think
turned out pretty good, which, yeah, I don't think any of us, if you told us that at the beginning of the process, we would have realized.
no, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It was hard fought on multiple fronts. So let's get into yeah, and you can. I think this is another angle of it, right?
Oh, yeah, that's another angle of it. Like, a few of these are, like, going to be multiple angles, but you can kind of see, like, the other side, too. There's, like, a dome-shaped building that was, like, very built, like, different from the top and bottom. I think I have another image in there of that one, but
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the forced altar.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also see how just the composition overall changed from the top one to the bottom one, where becomes more clear, more focused, because our game has a lot of verticality and you can go up on top of things and you can see a lot of different angles of stuff. Like that also makes this a whole lot more complicated. We decided to do a lot of the most like challenging things possible all in one. So
yeah, I think it was yeah. Also, a big thing was working with the design team to like make sure that compositionally, like from as much spaces as possible that are like meant to be choke points or meant for you to like stop and look, are like compositionally like has forms to it that are recognizable. So I think that was a good back and forth for our teams.
yeah, we learned so much. All right, we're done with Iron Root. Now we're elsewhere. Where are we?
This is the shroom biome. I think we've shown this area in like before in promotional stuff, but
We
this is like
have.
a really fun example of like narrative space, and that the one above is actually it isn't. I wouldn't say this is necessarily like like a level design pass off to like environment like the other ones were. This is more just like this is what our understanding of our kits and our look was in the beginning, and like blocking it out to like how it ended up coming together in the end with like when we found like the vibe we wanted, or like how cluttered we wanted the space to be, and like what we wanted to be cluttered with, and like our material work I think settled in really nicely. So this is just more of like a one-to-one for Enviro.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the general shape and scale of things stayed relatively similar. Like the ceiling got a little taller, and I think there's some broken bits up there to accommodate certain aspects, but the layout overall stayed pretty similar.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I think the ceiling is actually the same height. It's just like you can't jump or anything up there. It's just an illusionary wall now of like dense fog, so that it feels taller, which is fun. But
Yeah, that's a good
yeah,
trick.
I think it
That's a
worked
really good
well.
trick. Yeah, I remember. I think this was a space that I think Nate had decked out long ago on like
Yeah.
the very early version. But it's pretty cool to see the progression between just what lighting adds and kind of like changes in composition and obviously materials changes, and like you said, that kind of like implication of a taller ceiling without really being taller in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's all in the way that I mean, a lot of it comes down to beyond composition lighting, and
True.
you do a fair amount. I mean, like all the artists do a fair amount of like decking and lighting in this. How do you find lighting to be as a discipline? Is it something that you enjoy or something that you begrudge?
Oh, I love it. I guess it's like one of the like nice parts at working at a medium to small size studio is that uh being a generalist in your profession, like environment art in my case, is like better in a lot of ways because you're more explorative with it. But I think that like all of the different aspects I love to a point. If I had to do one of them all the time, I'd probably lose my mind. Yeah.
Probably. Well, I think
Yeah.
part of our advantage here too, and we'll jump to another scene unless you want to say something else on this, is that we have this kind of low poly ish look. It's a more it's stylized. It's not as high fidelity as a AAA game with all the verts and all the fancy super high res textures and whatever else. And in fact, like we use vert painting a lot on many of our objects in order to kind of more cheaply get a certain look and vibe. And we use gradients and we
Yeah.
use lighting to a big advantage. But it creates a certain aesthetic for us, but also allows us to achieve something that looks good and somewhat expensive without actually being as wildly expensive as it is to create those super high res ultra real assets that a lot of AAA studios do.
True. It's also like a fun tricks because it's like in particularly this case and stuff like that. Like you can really it's like a good example of how much we learned along the project. But the fact that there's no like one-to-one like painted textures in this, it's only normal maps and like flat colors and stuff like that. All of these are like mostly like that, which is pretty fun, and mostly yeah.
Yeah.
it saved us a lot, I think, in the end, with like not having many textures in the environment work.
It let us get by. I mean, there are a lot of clever tricks, and I'd love for you to talk more about them as we dig into these, that allowed a relatively speaking, small team build a very big game for us. Like, sure, this isn't, we're not building a Assassin's Creed, which is 100 hours long or anything like that, but this is a humongous world, and especially for a team that's, give or take, in the earlier days, it's just a handful of people, and then grew to 12, and then 20-ish, and now it's been between like 20 and 30 as we're shipping it out. It's like, that's ultimately not sounds like a lot of people, but it's not a lot of people for the scale of this game. And especially when we're considering, it's like, well, it's you and it's Nate as our environment artists, and like other people pitch in, like Cosimo and Jack has too, and other people like do some VFX work and whatever else. It's like just basically like two core environment artists to build all this out is a pretty wild ask.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge learning experience. But also it was kind of fun to have a lot of ownership over it. But I think it turned out pretty cool, and I absolutely love doing like stylized stuff, because there's a whole nother level of like, you can tell if somebody's doing like stylized in a way that's well done, because you can see the tricks that they're doing to be able to like pull off a look. Or it's like a lot of the times you'll do like normal maps and stuff like that, and instead of like doing the edging on everything the way you would when you're like painting it, you can hint and your eye will complete the shapes, which is kind of like a fun challenge that you have with that in comparison to like hyperrealism.
Yeah, fair enough. Is there anything on this scene that you want to jump into?
I think one thing, and then it's pretty much the major thing, is that we had a really fun time figuring out the colors that we wanted to do for this face. That was like
fun
I think
time.
we spent,
I like that. I like that label.
I had a fun time, because I was the
I'm
one who was
glad.
in charge for a while with like setting up like the different watercolors. That was like a very interesting time for us, where I think we went from like blue to the purple to like orangey to like lots of different colors, and we ended up settling on green, which worked pretty well in the end. But it was very interesting to go through that process and figure out like a color palette for this area. So I like how it showed up in the end.
I mean, it turned out great. It was, I recall us having quite a few different conversations and kind of trial and error on the color stuff, because the problem is you have to blend it with the skybox. You have to blend it with the kind of ground around you, because it's also a hazard, and it's dangerous acid water. And then we also have the clouds, which are this kind of tealy, lighter blue. And so combining all those elements together, the rusty stuff, the like ship parts stand out just fine. But when you have these broad sweeping chunks of landmass and water shelf pieces and clouds that are all just kind of, and skybox that are all kind of competing for your attention, and you need to know at a glance like what is and isn't dangerous. It was quite an effort to like get it all correct, I think. But I'm glad that you found it fun, because it was one of the harder challenges, I think, for us on color palettes to get this right, to be legible.
Yeah, I think this zone was like definitely a big challenge for specifically color palette. I feel like each zone had like its more like major difficulties with like when it came to figuring out things. Like the first one we were looking at was like a lot of like design compositional layout, and then this area was like a lot of like color layout.
It was fun. I'll agree. It was tough but fun. All right, we're going back to the woodsy area.
Oh yeah, this was more just like, this is an example of a space that's like more 1-to-1. You can see like you're just like meant to jump to that goo. So, and it worked out pretty well 1-to-1 between what the design put down to what the environment group ended up doing, where mostly we did secondary decking, which is like the walls are like the bushes and some different placement of trees, but it's pretty similar.
Right. You didn't. There wasn't like a fundamental shift on the flow of this level. The biggest
Hmm.
change was that wall piece, instead of being traversable, got broken down so you can jump over there. But I think part of that was because it was confusing to players. You know,
Hmm.
a lot of this process ends up being a lot of back and forth with design and people who are playtesting, whether it's internal or external people, and environment art, and then kind of all trying to communicate together and collaborate, collate the information, and make something that actually flows, and then retest it again and do the same kind of song and dance, talking and going back and forth between everybody. It's even
Yeah.
just this corner, as like much as it was the same, like it was quite a bit of work, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah, as you were saying, it's like you'll design will make a space, we'll go through it, and Mario will like deck it, and then maybe design will go back and be like, that doesn't quite feel the way that it did before, and then we'll be like, he'll make changes to like add gray box back, where they felt like it's missing, and then we'd be like, okay, we got to follow this ledge a little bit more closely. Or like we'll pass it to QA in the later stages, and they'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm confused by this. Design will go in and they'll make their changes to try and fix that confusion, and then we'll go back in and redeck that area to like just make it match the feel again. So it's like whole iterative circle. So
Yeah,
mhm.
it's it can be a real jerk sometimes to like refine a space enough that it's shippable, where it feels
Mhm.
good, where it flows, where it's got like the right sight lines, where it makes sense, and where it's decked, to an artist's sensibilities and standards. And this is one of those areas that like stayed the same for years and didn't like functionally change really. And then seeing it finally decked, it's like I think it's one of the first. It's one of the first areas, this like cliffside section in the old city, that ended up being decked early on for the past almost 2 years now. That it was mostly finished.
Mhm.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
All right, what do we got here? What's going on with this place? Looks spooky.
Yeah. This one is kind of more an example where we got something from design that was more conceptual, so it wasn't like super like the concept was is you go up this building, go up the side of it, and it's got some platforming, but there was a little bit more leeway from the art side to like how we wanted that to end up looking, and like how we wanted it to like gradient out as you got higher and higher up the building. As
Mm-hmm.
long as like the goal was met that you're platforming up this, then it was like a lot more free form from our side.
Right.
Hmm.
And I don't know, do you prefer it to be a little more conceptual or a little more rigid from the design? Like what's your balance there on preference?
Um, I would say from like rigid to free form, I'd probably be uh, like I'd probably be a little bit closer to free form, but I want some good structure. Like I want it to be clear what the intent is.
Hmm.
100%. Like everybody's confident that like if it doesn't fit that, somebody can like look at it and be like, no, that's not
Right.
quite right. Yeah. Instead of it being more or less like we're not quite sure what we want to do with the space, so
Yeah.
why don't you try some stuff? I'd be like that. I'm a little bit more nervous about. Uh,
Well, why are you nervous about that?
I guess like I get a little bit more nervous about it because uh, I don't think that I am the best choice, because at that point it's like it's leaning more into me doing design work,
Hmm.
and that's not exactly my biggest forte. And I'd rather like admit when I feel like somebody else is probably more qualified for that than um, do something that I don't think that I'll be as successful as somebody else.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And definitely, certain folks can lead more to can lean more towards design and layout, and others can lean more towards lighting and composition, or other aspects. And I remember
Yeah.
this space being conceptually a bit different for a long time. Like if you see the
Hmm.
top shot from the design side, laid something out where you're doing more climbing than anything.
Yeah.
And then it got transformed at a certain point, I think by Luke on the
Yeah.
team. And he made it so that because we have wacky gravity in our game, trademark, that you could skate up, and have this kind of fast paced movement that then goes into this more like conceptually beautiful space with the big lava
Hmm.
ball and all this. I think it's in our last trailer that we put up before a moment like this, instead of this kind of more plodding climb. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty big difference when it comes to like thinking about decking, right?
Yeah, this was actually a very interesting conversation point for the line of when is it okay to take a breath to recognize the beauty, and when should you fill a space with with more gameplay elements? Like, where's the balance there? Where it's like it's okay if it's not exactly the most challenging thing that you're doing right now, because it might be a good moment to let the player look and just like have some speed and flow. So that was like a big talking point, I think, when we did this with even with including Troop. I think he did the last like talk with him, and now he was like interested in moments like this for creating like very awe-inspiring like audio design moments with it too.
For
So
sure.
mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations that go into spaces, into every space, but then particularly spaces like this, which are, I think, as you're alluding to, like kind of these set piece moments.
Mhm.
All right,
Yeah.
let's get into some jump pads. What's up with these jump pads?
Yeah. So the like conceptually, this kind of idea here, I think, was like the main thing that we got from design was this was a training opportunity to like learn how they work. Um, this went through a lot of iterative process where it's like the intro sections are um, like they may look really simple, but there's some trickiness to just introing a space that you can make something that's like a tutorial, but you don't want it to feel that way, right? So
Right.
it's like trying to figure out how to like intentionally trap a player with the way a space looks, but not make it feel that way was like kind of the idea for spaces like this. So and introduce them to all the elements. So it. These are generally pretty fun. I These are on the easier side from the enviro side in comparison to the design side. So I know that the design side went through so many processes with this, and then our side it was pretty simple because it's like trap the player. But yeah, I thought it's pretty interesting to show a little bit more of like uh, Beach's style and the shift, even just like those Houdini islands, like that big like S turn right there. That's in like our proto mode where they don't have the nice edging or anything like that, like the crackly like rocks where it doesn't have any of like the normal maps or anything on the sides. And then compared to the bottom image, which was after developing it, was just switching like flipping a switch to have those islands change from like what you see in the top to what you see in the bottom, which was some wizard work from Houdini people.
Very wizard work. I think the kind of key takeaway when it comes to more stylized or minimalist work, art or especially in this case in 3D in our game is it's all these little details that end up adding up to make it look a whole lot more rich and textured, even though they're
Mm-hmm.
sparse, even though it's kind of like the illusion of or alluding to, like we don't do like a full treatment for the wall texture in a way that a lot of games would, just like, hey, this is rock and you see that like wild
Mm-hmm.
texture on it. It's like, no, a lot of what helps to achieve this type of look is implicit rather than
Mm-hmm.
explicit. You give the hints of things, and then your brain connects the dots on it, and we're able to like keep a certain level of fidelity and a certain level of understanding visually for the player without having to again like build out those wild assets that a AAA team would.
Yeah. Yeah, no mega scans.
No mega
Sorry.
scans, no mega textures.
No mega
Sorry.
text. Sorry.
Sorry.
Our bad.
Our bad. All right, what's going
Oh my
on
god.
here?
I forgot how many woods ones I put in
Lots of
here. But this
woods.
is, yeah. This one is like just another one that generally actually stayed pretty much the same. I think this one survived for one of the
Mm-hmm.
longest surviving areas,
Yeah.
which is just like, this is another intro space for a mechanic, which those ones are hard again for design, but less difficult on the Enviro side. So we tend to just work very closely to what they give us because it's very particular for how
Right.
they want the collision set up for these tutorialized spaces.
Right. You,
So
you can see like the little black splotches in spaces, which indicate like where this enemy can shoot, and design, right, like exactly as you're saying, spent quite a while kind of finessing and finagling this stuff to get it right. And so
yeah.
even if you make minor changes to it, it can kind of break a sequence. So that's a difficult thing to balance. I mean, that sounds tedious. Was it tedious to do that?
Yeah, there's like times with these kinds of spaces because it is so structured that we ended up finding a pretty good flow though, that when there would be the time where this would be like, okay, my lead would be like, okay, you're gonna take a stab at this gray box area. I'd be like, okay, what designer worked on it? And then it would be like, oh, it was Jordan. Oh, it was Luke. Oh, it was Michael. And I'd be like, which one of you who worked on it can sit down with me and tell me what parts are absolutely crucial that they stay exactly the way they are, like collision wise? And that it's just like opening that communication flow and making sure to talk to the people is like super important for these kinds of spots.
For sure. All right. We got a half woods area. What's up with this spot?
This is another tutorial. I didn't realize how many tutorial spaces I put in
They're
here.
good
But
spaces. There are a lot. It's a lot
yeah.
of funnel points, but they kind of like they're very special and very particular.
Yeah. This one was just kind of fun because we had to figure out, this is the example of one of the only areas where we actually had to have materials transition from one biome to the next, which I thought was pretty interesting because all of them are like, there is a level of separation that's like slight, but it's there and you can see the transitions. But this one is like the only space that it's actually gradiently melded into each other.
Right. You get a hard cutoff in a lot of our spaces, but yeah,
Like you get
we tried a lot of different
yeah.
transitions in here, including some metallic tunnelways.
Oh yeah, that was fun time.
Oh yeah,
But yeah,
I miss those, but they were also a pain.
they were, but they're really cool.
Yeah. All right. So we got a snowball above, right, or a rice ball, and then we got a drippy spike shadow. What's going on here? I've described them perfectly.
Yeah. I don't know how much more I can add, but this is kind of like an example of where it's pretty different if you see like the top and bottom. Like that whole top section I think was cut, but it was a cool space. But then when it came to the combination of that big rice ball, it the interactions on that were really cool, but from the tech side, we never quite figured out like to like a comfortable space how we wanted that to flow. So we tried to keep the feeling of that as much as possible in the new, less ricey ball. So, but it's like, it was a pretty fun time to try and figure out how to, I would say fun, but this was actually in a case where I would say it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Oh,
where
yeah.
to keep the feel of that without having to, with knowing that we're not going to be able to have all the tech support we wanted to be able to achieve exactly the idea, but we want to keep the feel. Because it's just like, again, it's a smaller team and there's a lot of really crazy technical stuff going on in these spaces, so there's there's only so much that you can like spread people thin.
Right.
So choices had to be made.
Yeah, we had to make a lot of tough choices in this place in particular, like you're saying. That tower on top, we cut pretty much that entire level. Like we had a lot of levels, and it's a lot easier to kind of block out the idea of a level and, you know, design a space that feels like it could flow well, than it is to actually finish it. Because finishing it means many different things, you know, on the design side, on the programming side, on the QA side of things, and then especially as we're talking about environment here, decking all of these different spaces is a pretty tall order.
Yeah, it definitely was for a lot of these spaces being like, I love this idea, I really want to do it, but you made a circular building and our kit doesn't do that. So if you want that, it's going to take time to make a kit.
It's going to
So
take
it's like,
me
love it.
5 weeks to do this.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
fuck you for making me do this.
Yeah, exactly. But
It was a cool space. I miss it, but you know, you gotta cut the tough stuff sometimes. Those are the things that fall away during games development. I think it'd be fascinating to hear. Oh man, I'd love to hear some of the wilder stuff that like bigger games have cut too, because I'm sure you know they have a bigger production group that can do more potentially. So I wonder at some of the wilder levels that got even further than stuff like this that almost made it but didn't. And then it was somebody's baby that, you know, took 2 or 3 years to make and then just chopped it at the last
Rest
hour.
in peace. Sorry, Luke.
R.I.P. All right, let's get through some of these. We're coming up on Q&A time pretty soon. This is a fun one.
Oh my God. Yeah, this was actually one that is almost 1-to-1.
Yeah.
So that survived, but yeah, this is an example again of another tutorial space. So I you know, until I started talking about it now, I didn't realize how many of like the actual ones that survived the longest that are very like particular are the tutorial sections. So but yeah, this is pretty simple. Like mostly what we did was try and just like make the water make sense. So and you know, it came out pretty good. I don't really have that much to say about this. And then also like the few assets that literally barely changed, because we just like, it came out pretty good. It's like a lot of them was just like a lot of material changes again.
Right.
Like Beach went through a lot of like material changes. So.
Like the boat asset here, like the framework of it, it's relatively similar, and these kind of quote unquote trees for the beach are relatively similar. Yeah. I think the one asset that went through the most work here in this whole frame is this little guy. That little guy. I remember we had one playtest where the playtester, there's like nothing else going on in this space. And you couldn't get to the new area because it's trying to teach you, like, you have to slash this thing, and then it'll, like, shoot out its tongue, and you can rail grind up to things, you know, to get to the next space. It's, like you said, it's a tutorial and teaching moment, so it's very particular. And when we had it in there, like, the person refused to even see this thing. You know, whatever was going on is like blinders up, where it's like couldn't even tell what this was at all, and just like was jumping on places and trying to get up high over here or there, whatever else, like spent, you know, good 10, 15 minutes maybe of like wondering where the heck to go next. And it was painful. It was painful to watch that. It's like, oh no. And a lot of work went into these little fellas.
Yeah, if you like consider how much time it probably took me to like deck this space, to like how much time it took for that one asset, it's like a monumental difference.
Yeah, so, it's a pretty huge gap. All right, well, let's speed through these last ones and then we can do some Q&A.
Sounds good.
What's going on here?
This is just like an example of kind of like where we would get something from design. The next phase is that our lead, Kazuma, who's also, luckily enough, it's really nice to have a lead that's also a concept artist. So where he would take the idea that they gave, and then there's like obviously a few more steps in between there, but this is how we ended with it, and you can see what elements of it survived.
Yeah, this was on design. This is a very early idea that I had put forth to have like this cliffside temple, and then build out these giant statues. And these are kind of these, bear-like, tanuki-like people that you end up encountering as one of their worlds. And it it transformed quite a bit over the years, literally years. Like I think this old one is this first one is from quite a while ago,
Yeah,
meaning
right.
several years ago now.
Right. I mean, but the general concept left, we wanted like a big wall that like showed the world, and it's still there. The concept's there.
Yeah, the
But
concept's there, and a lot of people worked really hard to like bring that to fruition. So, what's this is oh yeah, what's going on
Forest out
here?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the major areas that I like took a big stab at. That I think actually it was Cosmo, our who did the design section
Right.
for this. Very circular building. We didn't have any assets to make circular
Nope.
buildings. So that was a really fun time of me like basically creating a pole in the middle and like using that as an anchor point for every asset to make this entire building. So I'm pretty sure that still exists in the level. It's just hidden.
Yeah.
So if you look right in the middle of there, you can imagine there's a pole there.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think the original ask here was like some sort of sewage system that was all
Yeah.
kind of going into one another, and yeah, Cosmo took that and ran with it and made a really cool space. And then over time, it just completely transformed into some other type of thing, but still had generally the same layout.
Yeah, this one was like kind of close layout. Narratively changed a huge amount. And I would say design wise, I've changed a decent amount, but not nearly as much as this area changed narratively.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, we're hitting 350. Wolf, thanks for chatting through these. Do you want to do questions with me?
Sure.
Let's do it. I think we have. All right. Let's see what's going on here with questions. What? Here we go. Not Freddie M asks, when you're building environments, how do you know when to stop versus keep adding, altering things?
Hi, Freddie. That's a good friend of mine. I guess when you stop, it depends on the person. With me, I tend to be like, I'm starting to get diminishing returns where it's like, it isn't quite feeling like enough is changing between adding things, or you have a lead who's like, stop touching things, you've done enough. Well, like, we can go back. We always go back to these spaces. Like we were saying earlier, it goes through like QA to design to back to like environment art. It's like you will get another chance to add or change things in the future, and sometimes it's just the best to just step away. So I'm pretty decent at that, like stepping off point.
It's good to know. All right, the game mentor Q&A question: does the environment change as a result of your progress, or does it stay static throughout the game? It stays relatively static. There's like some things here and there that happen that alter a bit of what's going on, but that's, I wouldn't expect that you're going to see like some seasonal change or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I would say it's pretty static. It's like
Pretty static.
Yeah.
Emily asks, Wolf, did you put any secrets and Easter eggs into the game?
I like that she asked this because she just wants me to talk about them.
Yeah.
Yes, there is. There are a decent amount that we put in there, and I'm not going to talk about them any more than that because that's for everybody to find. It's kind of like sacrilegious to talk about the Easter eggs, where they are, or anything like that. So good luck, guys.
Good luck. Maximiano asks, there is, let me boil this down. Oh, well, they're asking about transitions between the biomes, separate areas, and if it will, have seasons in the environment, or it'll be static and non-changing. So,
yeah,
pretty similar.
Static. Yeah, the only area that had like a gradient was the one that we showed between like basically the white to the foresty red area. All of the other ones are like, you're on this platform, that's this biome, you jump to this platform, that's a different biome, or like stuff like that, where it's just like it's a clear cutoff.
It's true. All right, the Wizard of Munaz asks, what game engine was this made in? What other games would you say influenced the environmental look? Well, it's the Unreal 4. And Wolf, what inspired you?
For this,
Yeah, for the look of things.
Cosmo, he's does a lot of it, and then you set up the spaces to be very clear for like what we wanted like narratively or like what we wanted like the feel to be. And then I think like major influence is like depends on the biome. Like I remember off the top of my head like Nausicaa was a clear influence for the shroom area.
Right.
And yeah, it depends on the area. A lot of them were actually like pretty established in the field and mostly refined even before I got here. So yeah, I think that there's like a ton of different references that we use for each of them. It really depends on what you're looking at. Like
Yeah.
pretty sure we probably use some dune references for the beach because sand.
Sand. It's true.
Yeah.
Sand. Beach. Sand.
Yeah.
All right. TD Pod asks, HLD did the minimalist environment storytelling, seeing a small birdfolk hut in the North Zone, where there is a small fledgling rotted at the bottom of the cliff. Spicy. How do you translate that kind of story in a scene?
Ooh, environmental storytelling.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think we carried a really interesting environmental storytelling style that was more in a fun way, in my opinion, where it's like you can find it if you look, and it is, and a lot of times, more interpretation that you can take with things. So it creates more of like a discussion as opposed to like things that are very prescriptive in the environment.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good answer. Lucas asks, is Ray part of a species? If so, what's it called and what's her planet called? I will not answer any of those questions. She is part of a species, but I'm not gonna say
it's
any.
For you to find out.
Not gonna name names right now.
Yeah.
You know, it wrecks the mystery. Lacquerware, apart from going 3D, were there specific goals in designing this game that were based on specific reflections on HLD? Well, of course. I think that anytime you make something, whether it's a video game or a piece of art or other piece of art or, write a book or make a movie or whatever it may be, I think you'd be wise to pay attention to, all the problems and kind of failings, trials and tribulations that you had and take from them and learn from them. And try and make sure you don't repeat the same mistakes. Try and make sure you do things better the next time around. And Solar was no different. There were a lot of things on Hyperlight that, I would have, going back in time, hindsight being 2020 and all that jazz, changed about our process, done better or whatever else. We ended up with something that I'm very proud of, that we're very proud of. But even still, like, there are better ways to do things all the time. And so bringing that forward into Solar, I did what I could to bring those lessons in. And Solar just had a whole lot more to it, a lot more people, a lot more work to be done. This is, again, a 5-year project in production, and we had to build out a lot of technology and everything else. So there's only so much you can bring over from that experience that would even be applicable to kind of what we scaled up to. So I can't get too much more specific on that, other than, were there specific goals in designing this game? I guess the specific goal in designing this game that was a reflection of Hyperlight was try not to do too much, but then we did the opposite. So that one didn't really make it through, but that's okay. We ended up with a pretty cool thing in the end, but it was a long path. Daniel asks, is most of the architecture in sight all accessible? Can you reach rooftops of ruined buildings?
I would say it's mostly accessible, and that was like kind of one of our main goals with the design of these spaces, that we wanted to have everything that you see, for the most part, I'd say 90% of it, in one way or another, you can get to it.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a good split. The vast majority of it, yes. Atrox Star asks, do you have any plans after the game is released, like DLC or free updates? Also, how are you planning to advertise the game? I really want everyone to hear about this game. We're putting it out on social media. We have platforms supporting us right now. You can pre-order it on Epic Games Store. I believe you'll be able to pre-order it on the PlayStation Network soon too, if it's not up already. As far as DLC and all that stuff, we will definitely be doing patches to support the game and make sure that we fix stuff for people that find bugs and all that fun stuff. But no plans for DLC or anything like that. I think this is going to be a pretty complete and well encapsulated experience. So never say never, but hey. Lucas Exemplar asks, might we get a Ray action figure or perhaps a plushie? Maybe.
I want one.
Yeah, we'll have to see. It depends. A lot of merch stuff ends up depending on like how successful things end up being. So if the game, is a good success, then sure, we'll dive into some fun merch like that. So, all right, I'll do one more here. And the question is, what was it hard to go from 2D to 3D? Yes. I mean, yes, for sure, in a lot of ways, but also it was an easy decision, and it was clearly the right choice for us in many ways. For me personally, I was good on the pixel art and the 2D, and I really wanted to move into 3D spaces and give the player a lot more control and be able to get them to feel like they can get lost in a space and absorbed in a world, But the transition from something like Game Maker and pixel art is a huge leap to Unreal and all the wild stuff that we had to do. And just listening to some of the things that Wolf was talking about here, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of work. Everything is 10 times more work in 3D, and especially when you have a camera you can just move around anywhere, you have to make all sides of an object, unlike 2D. So I don't know, Wolf, can you speak to the challenges of 3D more broadly?
I mean, it's also like a lot of like technical know-how depending on the engine that you're using too, like whether you need to have like a basic knowledge to like a deeper knowledge of blueprinting or like C# when in the case of like Unity. So it's, and there's math. As much as like every artist likes to pretend they hate math, a lot of the times it's very useful. So it's I've never personally messed around with 2D. I'm not much of like an artist when it comes to that side. If you asked me to like paint or something like that, I don't think I'd be able to help you. I'd point you in the direction of someone else. But it's definitely a fun challenge because you also have to take in, I guess, performance into consideration as well. When it comes to making your 3D objects, like you can't make it have like a million polygons or anything like that. You have to like be fully aware that this is going to have to be in something that needs to function, So it's like that's a fun challenge in its own to balance with making assets and like how you want them to function.
It's true. Well said. I think we're ending up. I think on time here. Wolf, is there anything else you can say for us about, I don't know, getting into games and any kind of advice you have for folks as a parting few words here?
I mean, it's probably the easiest time in history to find a way to get into games. Like I listened to a lot of the stories of a lot of the people on this project even, and then the kind of like structure they had to go through to even like, find games, because a lot of the times when they were getting into it, that wasn't even a thing that existed.
Mm-hmm.
But now there's amazing programs out there that if it's something you're interested in, or like you can learn online, and you can get like an online degree, or you don't even need a degree for these kinds of jobs. So it's like,
No.
if you want to do it, like just start trying, join some game jams, meet some people. I got this job by meeting the other artists here at a game dev drink up event at a bar. I mean, obviously you have to be of age, but like I met somebody at a bar and we had a good time, and then from then on, like I talked to Alex, and that's like there's a million ways to get a job in the industry. You just got to keep trying and find your strong suits. I'm pretty good socially, so I would go out a lot to the events as opposed to uh, solely like making stuff and then putting it on like ArtStation or anything like that. I found that like interacting was a good way for me to go about it.
It's true. Again, well said. Totally agree. Put yourself out there, not just visually on your portfolio or otherwise, but in person, network and say hello to people. And you never know who you're going to meet and who that person knows or whatever else and what that might lead to. So, all right. Wolf, thank you so much for hanging out here, for sharing your experience and talking about neat stuff and challenging work. And thanks everybody else for joining us here on Heart to Heart. We'll see you after the holidays, the Thanksgivings. We'll return in December for at least one more of these, I think. We'll figure out who's going to join us, but I think that's it for today. All right, everybody. We'll see you in the future. Count it down, 3, 2, 1, goodbye.